I was having some reservations as to whether or not I should review this movie, but then I remembered I have this shirt. So, meh. I just hit the door with my elbow. Hey everyone, Divvy here. Sorry it's been a while since I've done a video. The reason for that is because it was my birthday this week and there were some festivities that were taking some time out of my schedule, and because of that I couldn't edit some of the videos that I have saved up, or I couldn't talk about certain things that I've been wanting to talk about, whether it be shows, movies, or whatever, or recent news for that matter. But one of those festivities, as I call it, was my brother taking me to go see this new Dragon Ball Z movie that was released by Japan. That was the big thing over there in Japan, but they decided to release it on a limited release here in the States in some scarce theaters. We had to drive like a good 20-25 minutes to find the nearest movie theater that is showing this movie for only that one night, which was on Tuesday night, August 12th at 7 o'clock. So we had to drive all the way over there, and we managed to barely catch it. We missed the first 5 minutes. So I'm telling you right now, I missed the first 5 minutes, and I don't know what happened in terms of the story in those 5 minutes, so I might be a little shady as to where the movie takes place in terms of the Dragon Ball Z timeline, because this is within Dragon Ball Z, not GT, not Dragon Ball, even though it has certain references to the different areas of the Dragon Ball universe. But anyways, I managed to catch this movie, and I figured, you know what? Let's go ahead and talk. I love Dragon Ball Z, so why not talk about it? Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods is one of those movies that they put out here and there. I believe it's been a while since the last one, and you know, some of those movies include I can't remember their names, but you got the one with Broly, you got the one with Cooler, and you got the one with, I believe, Bardock, which is Goku's father. And so sometimes they release these movies that take place within the Dragon Ball Z universe, but they were never part of either the manga or the anime series, but they are canon. They do fit into the universe, saying, hey, this was going on while this other thing was going on. They make references to be able to connect the story that's happening within this movie to the bigger picture that is the manga as well as the anime. In Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, Lord Deveris, which is this ancient deity, wakes up from his eternal slumber only to discover that one of his foes, Frieza, has been defeated by a much more powerful being, meaning Goku, and so he seeks out to find Goku in order to see whether or not he is truly the worthy adversary that he's been waiting for. And you could argue that that's a bit of a cheat that these movies often use, which is that, hey, this thing was happening, this person was like asleep or something like that, which is one of my minor gripes, minor nitpicks with the movies, that it does that thing where this person or creature or whatever the hell the Z Warriors are going to be going up against was sleeping during the actual events that were happening in Dragon Ball Z, but then now they wake up and they're like, what? Goku, I must fight! And you know what, I'm actually going to go ahead and take that issue that I have with the movie and lump it together with other things that happen in the movie that I'm going to go ahead and cluster and say that this cluster in and of itself is a nitpick of mine with the movie, and that is some traditional Dragon Ball Z tropes. And they really are Dragon Ball Z tropes. They almost happen specifically in Dragon Ball Z. Tropes include that one where this creature was asleep this entire time and finally they wake up at the most convenient moment, and so now they wreak havoc saying, hey, Goku, come fight me. And speaking of Goku, how many times is he just gonna sit back and watch shit happen and then say, wait, I'm here? Bruh. He does that once again in this movie, but to be fair, they even go as far as to make fun of that. And I'm like, okay, I'm still gonna acknowledge that you went along with that, but at least you kind of made fun of it, so I'm conflicted as to whether or not I should take that point away or give it back. But the story for the most part is fine. Like I said earlier in the review, there's references to past events and future events that are going to happen in the Dragon Ball universe, and neat little references, and some will mostly connect with the audience that have been keeping up with Dragon Ball Z. In the theater, I can tell almost everybody. There were a bunch of dudes that I can tell either you're single or you have a girl who doesn't necessarily like Dragon Ball Z, but they were able to let you come to the theater, because everybody in that theater, I can tell, were huge Dragon Ball Z fans, and they were able to capture the references. And every now and again there would be a reference, and I would hear somebody in the theater go, "Oh hey, it's that." There is, however, one that kind of went over my head, and maybe it's because I haven't seen Dragon Ball, not Dragon Ball Z, but Dragon Ball, when Goku is a kid, Bulma's a teenager, and they're looking for the Dragon Balls and all that. It's been such a long time since I've seen Dragon Ball for the first time. Very long time. And I can't seem to remember the 3 kids that were featured in this movie that, from the dialogue that they exchanged, they weren't really kids before. They were full-fledged adults, and their goal was to become evil through the power of the Dragon Balls. But now they've been turned into kids, and I can't remember how that happened. And so their subplot was a little hard to connect with as opposed to the main plot, because I couldn't really remember these characters from Dragon Ball canon. So I'm like, okay, who are these people again? But while we're on the subject of characters, let's go ahead and talk about our main villain, Lord Devarius. I might be butchering the name here, but Devarius, or something like that. I'm very iffy with his name. They would often mention it very quickly, and I'm like, Lord Devarius. He is an ancient deity, and from his appearance, he looks like an Egyptian deity, but they never really pointed that out whatsoever. But his character was actually pretty fun. I really did like his character. However, the only problem that I can think of with his character is practically the same problem that I can think of with the movie itself, and that is just a little too much slapstick in this movie. There's moments where I was genuinely laughing and smiling, and I'm like, wow, that was pretty funny. That was a really good line with some excellent timing, and that works for the movie. What works against the movie is that sometimes they the Japanese, they push it just a little too far to where I'm like, okay, now you kind of lost me. Lord Devarius would do that from time to time, and so would the movie. Let's just say that if your favorite character in Dragon Ball Z mythology is Vegeta, you might just get pissed off as to what the writers did with Vegeta in this movie. Even though they kind of redeemed themselves later on when he has a scene where you're like, yes, that is the Vegeta that we know. The badass that we know. But before that, you have to go through this scene where you're like, what the fuck? But in the scenes where Lord Devarius wouldn't do that very slapsticky kind of humor, he had a really good wit and charm to him that I couldn't help but really like this guy. Even though the movie's trying to pitch him as a villain, I'm like, man, I dig this guy. I would really like to know more details about him, more about his past, because he's very charismatic, and he had me hooked. Now, even though we get scenes where he demonstrates his power, that apparently is even too much for Goku, and he barely makes a move. You're like, wow, this guy means business. Towards the end, I never really felt like he was a genuine threat. I felt more in terror with Frieza or Cell, and then this movie says, oh no, this guy is way stronger than those two, way stronger than Goku at even Super Saiyan 3. And yet, I never really felt like the Earth was in danger, not only because this is a 85-minute movie, but also because we had those scenes of slapstick to go through with this character. But much like Lord Devarius, the movie itself would also have its moments where not only would it be charismatic, but it would also have some really beautiful animation, especially in the design of these characters, as well as the voice work, having all these US voice actors, because I understand it's also different voices in Japanese and whatnot, but they bring back everybody that voices their respective character from the US cast back. Sean Schemmel, Christopher Sabat, I can't remember his middle name, but Christopher Sabat, who does Vegeta and Piccolo, and Sean Schemmel, who does Goku, as well as other characters. They bring back everybody, so you have that very nostalgic feel for not only the design of these characters, but also the voice actors behind them, and some really intense action sequences that make you reminisce of the good times of Dragon Ball Z. And by the end of this movie, I'm like, I would really love to go back and watch all of Dragon Ball Z, all 4 periods of time, you know, the Saiyan Saga, Frieza, Cell, Buu, all of it. I really do want to watch it, especially this segment during the end credits where they flip through pages of the manga, and I'm like, man, I just really want to watch this again. Although I'm a little mixed on the 3D animation that was used for some of the backgrounds in this movie, Because when I saw that, I'm like, okay, obviously this movie's being done in 2014, so in order to kind of cut corners and get it released earlier, there's certain action sequences where they went ahead and used 3D animation to create the backgrounds when characters are like flying through the city and whatnot. I would have liked that more if, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but if they had released this movie in 3D, then they would have taken full benefit of those 3D animations that they have in the background when these characters are flying through these action sequences. But they didn't. In fact, when the movie ended, the menu from the Blu-ray player that the projection is used popped up, and I'm like, wow, state of the art. So I'm like, if you're not gonna release it in 3D, then why not just delay it a little bit and bring us that good old-fashioned full 2D animation that we remember from the 80s and the 90s when you were putting out Dragon Ball Z. And while we're on the subject of mixed reaction, there's this gray area, and in this gray area falls the cheese factor that Dragon Ball Z has always had. Those moments where you have a character who says, your power level is stronger than mine, and then they go into why it's stronger than them, and being a little too exposition, giving out too much exposition and saying, hey, this is what's going to happen, this is what's not going to happen if I don't do something about it, and you got the somewhat over-the-top delivery, and that happens again in Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. But the reason why that falls in the gray area is because by now, some of you guys will love that because it's nostalgic, and some of you guys have always had a problem with it. That is entirely up to you. Me personally, I fall in that middle area where I recognize that it's very cheesy and over the top, but at the same time, I love it because that's the kind of personality that Dragon Ball Z has always had. So even though it has its fair share of problems, I found Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods to be quite an entertaining movie, and one that I wouldn't feel ashamed to call part of the Dragon Ball Z universe, and one that I would definitely show to friends of mine that love Dragon Ball Z. I would actually take this and rent it or whatever, and rent it, and show it to my friend and say, hey, look, check this out. They released this movie recently. It's part of Dragon Ball Z. If you dig Dragon Ball Z, you would probably dig this movie, but you will recognize some of its flaws. And for that, I give Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods an 8 out of 10. But once again, I have to put a little addendum in that rating and say that it's a rather low 8 out of 10. That was borderline 7, but because it managed to charm me by the end, I'm willing to give it a pass. So let me know what you guys thought of Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, if you did somehow manage to see it, because I understand it did have a limited run. So if you managed to catch it, then let me know what you thought. And if you didn't, will you be catching it later on when it gets released on Blu-ray and DVD? Because eventually they will. I mean, how can they not? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.